We are assembling a kit model of a great 17th century Swedish man of war, the Vasa. Natalia, who is making these videos with me, has painted this model throughout. I have meticulously put together all the tiny pieces, and now it's finally starting to take shape. I think it just needs some additional tiny details to the paint job, some rigging, the sails, and it will be finished. And I hope that this will match the grandeur and the gloriosity of the original early 17th century Swedish galleon, the Vasa. But this ship is not only magnificent man of war, but also it has a great history. It is a story of how to turn a catastrophe, a disaster, into a formidable success. So first, the disaster. It's 1628. Sweden is at war with Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. The king of Sweden, Gustavus Adolphus, is in Poland, and he has just suffered great losses to his fleet during the Battle of Oliva, so he's in desperate need of new ships. And luckily, a couple of them are currently being built back in the Stockholm shipyards. One of them is Vasa, a new regal ship, the flag carrier of the Swedish Royal Fleet, a great hull, 60 meters long, 50 meters tall, very heavily armed. The king insists on it being shipped to him, sent to him as quickly as possible. But Vasa has a problem. It is unstable. It is too narrow, too tall. When you look at the aft superstructure, you can see that it's almost vertical. It's like a sailing skyscraper. This instability is evident, but well, the king insists, so his court is obliged to send him the ship. Comes the 10th of August 1628, thousands of Swedes are lining up the shores of Stockholm harbor to see this magnificent gala, this great ship setting sail for the first time and setting off for its maiden voyage across the Baltic Sea to Poland. Well, it starts nice, but after just 1,300 meters, the first stronger gusts of wind are banking the ship heavily to port. And because this is such a gala occasion, all the gun ports are open, and the ship banks so heavily to port that the lower gun deck catches water because of those open gun ports. Water rushes in, and at that moment, it's too late. The fate of the ship is sealed. It's now impossible for it to righten herself up, and in a matter of minutes, the ship sinks. Luckily, this happens just 120 meters offshore, so the majority of people who were on board are rescued. Unfortunately, around 30 sailors perish together with the ship. Instantly, it is decided that the ship needs to be raised because it is still visible. It sinks at a depth of around 32 meters, and the ship itself is 52 meters tall, so the tips of the masts are still visible. But back with the technology of the early 17th century, it appears very quickly that it is improbable that anytime soon the ship will be raised. So only the most precious elements of the ship fit out are salvaged, like the cannons, and then slowly the wreckage deteriorates, and the location of the wreckage is lost. And it isn't until the middle of the 20th century that again people start looking for the wreck. They found it, and the decision is taken to once again try and lift up the wreck of the Vasa. And one day, 333 years after its fatal maiden voyage, Vasa sees the sun again. And because of the chemical composition of the waters in Stockholm harbor, it is magnificently preserved. Almost no deterioration of the wood because of the lack of oxygen and lack of bacteria that could consume the structure of the ship. The archaeology is great. Thousands of artifacts are found, giving unprecedented insight into the lives of people in the early days of the 17th century. It now becomes obvious that this magnificent ship needs a matching home. And this is the Vasa Museum. The first thing I noticed when I looked at this building were those three giant masts. They do not look exactly the same as they did back in the 17th century ship, but they are the same height as they were back in the 17th century. So they give the impression of the height, the size of the giant hull that is inside. But for me, the main reason for those masts being here is more of a message that is conveyed by those masts in this building. Better than any marquee or a sign, they show out what is inside this building. You don't miss it, you just know that this is the building that houses this giant gem, the 17th century warship. The architects that were to build this, design this, faced difficult challenges. First, they had to design a building that was vast enough to house a great hull inside of it, and when it's inside, you have to both enable the people to see the size of the ship, the shape of the whole hull, but also give the people an opportunity to experience the ship up close, to notice all the intricate details of its ornamentation, almost to touch all the elements that have been preserved for the 333 years underneath the sea. The construction itself was an enormous task. First of all, you have to build a building around the space that was to house not only the ship, but also a temporary shed in which it was housed during its last voyage from the temporary museum to the final museum that you see now. It had to be built upon an existing structure which had to be filled with water to enable the pontoon to float into the construction site, and then the whole building had to be sealed off and the temporary walls of the shed were to be dismantled once the climate control was already in place in the new building. Well, everything went well, so let's see the ship inside this magnificent structure. A competition for the museum's design with over 300 entries was won by architects Marianne Dalbeck and Göran Månsson. After entering the building, it becomes easy to understand how they managed to do that. The sight of the ship in its entirety will take your breath away. Successive floors set back from the hull, much like stadium grandstands, and allow viewing the vessel from different angles. Next to the original craft, there's a scaled-down model of the Vasa with a reconstruction of the ship's original colors. In order to let the visitors admire the intricate details of the ship's preserved ornamentation, floors on the other side of the hull are very close to it, almost letting the audience touch the 400-year-old wood. It's a paradox that thanks to her sinking at the very beginning of the maiden voyage, the Vasa is the only 17th century galleon preserved to our times, and a priceless source of information about the lives of ordinary people in Baroque Europe. In this building, fascinating history and magnificent architecture come to one. And I think it's partly because of this architecture that it is so easy to experience the Vasa ship and to almost touch the history that it embodies. And maybe that's the reason hundreds of thousands of people come here every year. Thank you for watching this video. Click below to see more videos about architecture and click here to subscribe to this channel. See you soon.